Welcome. It has just gone 7 p.m., Thursday, the 17th of October, and you are watching episode 147 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap providing an insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, not always sweet with sugar, is my guest Owen Menkens, the chairman of the Canegrowers Queensland. Owen is a fourth-generation cane farmer and has been the director of Canegrowers Vertical Limited Board since 2010. He was elected as the Canegrowers Queensland chairman in 2022. Owen is also a member of the Australian Sugar Industry Alliance Board, the Australian Cane Growers Council, and the Canegrowers Queensland Policy Council, representing local views at the state level. He is also a cane supply agreement negotiator. Welcome, Owen.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. We've had some ups and downs in the recent 12 months, but in various locations. But overall, what do you think the situation is with the sugar industry is in Queensland? Is it in a good condition and got plenty of potential going forward, or is there other dramas we have to be facing soon?
Well, there's a lot of different stories in different areas. Obviously there's shrinking areas, and then there's probably areas that are growing as well. So there's a lot of variation. I think there's a positive story to tell with the industry. I think we have got potential to grow. I think that there is opportunity for us going forward, and I think. In some areas, I think we will definitely continue to grow.
We've had the recent problems up at Mossman with the mill closing, and looks, I presume it's still looking for a buyer. Are there any other areas that sort of under sort of threat, say in the next 3 to 5 years?
There's sort of the southern area has obviously shrunk a lot. The Bundaberg region, the mills have closed there. But there's actually a bit more of a resurgence in cane in that area at the moment. So they're actually expanding a little bit. The Maryborough Mill shut a few years ago, and most of that cane now gets transported to ISIS, but there's obviously a smaller crop there than what there was before. In the Mackay region, they're probably hampered mainly through some poor mill performance, so they can't get the cane crushed. So there's a lot of issues with trying to expand, even trying to expand the crop when the mill can't really crush it. So there's some serious issues at a few of those mills that they're spending money on them to try and upgrade them, but at this stage the performance hasn't really borne fruit. In the Burdekin region here, we've probably got a fair bit of potential to expand, but it's sort of it's up to the mill to be able to crush it. That's the issue. You need to have a mill that can crush the cane in a reasonable time, and so there's money being spent on the mills here as well. But there's probably opportunity for some more cane to come back in here as well, and the Herbert's probably similar as well. It's had a bit of a tough year this year, a lot of wet weather, but it probably does have a chance to expand a little bit. And Tully is probably the mill which could expand the most. It's probably got more available land than any mill to put more cane in, but they're just hampered by the ability of their mill to crush it. Although the mill is crushing very well for what it's got, it's just there's a lot more land that could go in Tully.
Well, I suppose the thing is the binders went some time ago, so you would think it would be reasonable for the other mills that are left to step up and be upgraded, so they can get extra supply and that into the system. Because the sugar price hasn't been too bad. There used to be all sorts of doom and gloom about the price years ago, hardly getting anything. But I'll just do a screenshot of the sugar prices over the last 10 years or so. There's a screenshot of the sugar price from 1992 through to last year. Well, obviously, it was always a sort of struggling industry, or it wasn't very great prices. But I suppose you've got to put that against indexation and that. Had a good peak in 2012. We sort of dropped off again, but we sort of are getting back to the a good level now. Do you think that can be sustained, or do you think there's threats, say, from our competitors like India and Brazil, or have we sort of got ourselves into a good position so we can stay competitive?
Yeah, I think from an international perspective, sugar consumption is increasing still, and it's been increasing for a couple of 100 years. So it's still increasing. It had a dip during COVID. That was probably a one-off, but other than that, every year it's increasing, and it's increasing by a fairly significant amount. So the world needs to get that sugar from somewhere. Brazil was able to supply it, has been able to supply it for the last 20 odd years, and India has obviously expanded its sugar production as well. But those areas are eventually they're probably going to not be able to supply all the sugar that the world needs. So that probably means that the price will, in the long term, should be higher than what it's been for the last period. There's obviously more opportunities. In Brazil, they have a massive ethanol industry where more than half the entire cane production goes into ethanol, but that ethanol industry has other opportunities as well with regard to sustainable aviation fuel and other options as well. So I think that there is always going to be a need for more sugar to be produced somewhere. And hopefully, because that happens, that should increase the price over the long term.
I suppose in the Western world, we probably consider we have too much sugar in our diets. But I'm sure new markets in the future, do you think as third world countries develop and developing countries get more wealthy, that's going to be the growth sort of areas?
Yeah, that's where the growth is. The growth is in the developing world. Yeah, the Australian sugar consumption's been dropping for many years, but per capita has been dropping. And yeah, per capita around the world in Western countries, it is falling consumption, but that's per capita, but the number of population is increasing. So therefore, there still needs to produce more sugar every year. So and in third world countries, obviously, as they become wealthier, the sugar becomes a staple rather than a luxury, and it increases consumption as well. So the world consumption is increasing by nearly 3/4 of the Australian sugar industry every year. So it's a great, there's a huge amount of sugar, and it's got to come from somewhere. So it's probably exciting in that respect. But yeah, you get fluctuations in the world market. You get periods when subsidized sugar gets dumped on the world market, which happened with India a few years ago. But I think overall, I think there's probably a brighter future ahead than we've had for many years.
Just talking there about whether it's a luxury or just a normal commodity. I mean, if you go back, I mean, sugarcane I think originally came from the Americas and introduced into Europe, along with things like cocoa and that. They were considered only for the rich at that stage. But as things develop, it's just an everyday commodity. What do you think it would take for it to be a more everyday commodity for third world countries and that? Because Do you think they've got to get over a lot of other problems before they can get to that stage, or or it just happens at the same time?
Oh, yeah, I think it just. I mean, I'm not sure how how that would, how that consumption works, but I know India is a very high consumer of sugar because they've traditionally always had a large sugarcane crop. So their per capita for a very poor country, they do consume a lot of sugar, but they use it more like a carbohydrate. So it's like a staple to you know for as opposed to other countries that use it like as a luxury. Um, yeah, I think it just happens naturally. Countries get, it becomes available. It's a good crop for. It's a good staple food for starvation and that sort of stuff. So I think I think it just takes over normal naturally usually.
The the problem with the Indian government subsidies before, has that now gone away, or is it still a looming threat?
Well, every pretty much every sugar industry in the world is subsidised except for ours. So that obviously is difficult. Um, Whether they're subsidised to a level, I mean, India was putting subsidised sugar on the world market, and we took them to the World Trade Organization to try and stop that from happening. Which, although we won the case, but it was appealed and it's sort of gone in limbo. But it did create enough discussion in India for them to stop exporting sugar. We did the same to Europe back in 2005. We took Europe to the WTO when they were dumping subsidized sugar on the world market. And we were successful in that case. And now, whenever they have a surplus of sugar and they have to export it, they have to pay the tariff. So they can only export it at the proper world price, not the subsidized price, which is good for us because it means that they're competing on a level playing field. Um, there's other incentives that most sugar industries have internally for their domestic production, which we don't have, which obviously means that their costs of production are way higher than ours. So we're not really competing on a fair market, but we've been in that sort of place for a very, very long time. Sugar is an interesting commodity because in a lot of third world countries, they see it as something that's important for the for starvation and other issues. So governments do like to subsidise sugar, especially domestic production, to make sure that they've got storage, and they've got in case of when things go wrong. So that makes it a lot harder. It's a lot more subsidised than most other commodities, which is difficult. But we're lucky in a way. We have a good export system. We have a good system of sugar terminals. We have a good marketing system, and we have Asia basically right at our doorstep. So there's a lot of markets there that are very close. Indonesia is obviously a very large market, and it's continually growing. We've got our older markets that we've been supplying for a long time: Korea, Japan, Malaysia. Those markets are still very strong. So we're up pretty lucky in regard to markets. They do want to pay extra for our sugar. We can deliver it on time, so that gives us an advantage. But yeah, obviously it's not great because of this subsidized pushing down on the world market. So we have to look at other options if we can, and that's a lot of what we're trying to look at.
In regards to our efficiency, in regards to harvesting and milling and that, can we improve further, or we're at the top of the tree for us that sort of efficiency availability?
Oh, you can always improve. I think we can always improve our availability in milling. We can improve our productivity and growing as well. It's not just a matter of just doing the same thing. You have to always improve, otherwise you'll get left behind. And sugarcane production is a classic. You know, it's a long crop. It's a sort of minimum 5-year crop. So you've got to when you choose to plant it, you have to really get everything right. And obviously we're trying to do it with less labor, and that's always difficult. And you know, you're trying to produce a crop cheaper and cheaper, because you sort of basically have to, with the rising costs and everything else, you have to get better. But yeah, there's a lot of ways we could do better. And hopefully this higher price that's sort of come in the last sort of 18 months to 2 years is will put some confidence in all those sectors so they can invest. I think there's a lot of a lot of investment going on into the industry, a lot of international investment, which hopefully can improve what we're doing at the moment.
In regards to the reef regulations and the emphasis on things like pesticides and fertilizer levels and all those sort of things, have you dealt with all those issues fairly effectively in regards to getting to the levels that they sort of demand, even though you can't measure out anything at the reef? But I mean, you can measure stuff like in the outflows of river. That's about the only place you probably get a bit of a measurement. But have the growers adapted to sort of reduce the use of fertilizers and pesticides and things like that over time?
Yeah, I think it's more a lot of the data when they first brought in the reef regulations was based on an assumption that growers used a lot more fertilizer than what they actually did. So it was more or less about proving what we do now is actually correct. So with our Smart Cane BMP program, it basically looks at growing sugarcane in the most productive and profitable way. And you do that. If you do that and you put the right amount of fertilizer on, you'll basically then you qualify under the standards of the reef. A lot of the reef regulations were brought in on a concept of benchmarks that were never going to be met. So I think they were extreme, and then there was some extremist elements in the 2019 legislation, which if enacted could have really hampered production. They could have really forced us to reduce fertilizer, which would have definitely reduced production. But at the moment, we've basically fended off a lot of that noise. I mean, reef regulations hasn't even been an issue really in the election campaign. No one's talking about it. 10 years ago, the 2015 election campaign, the Greens especially and Labor as well were both saying we've got to hit the farmers, we've got to hit the cane farmers, they're killing the reef. It was a common thing. Now they don't even mention it. Even the Labor Party, agree we're doing the best we can, and want to work with us to sort of solve these things. I think that's taken a lot of work to get that change in mindset. But I think overall, and don't get me wrong, there's extremist elements that want to shut us down. That's sort of the case in a lot of different agricultural industries, and you have to constantly prove you're doing the right thing, and that's the hardest bit. And there's also been a lot of real-time water monitoring that's happening that shows water quality in creeks and stuff, and it shows the effects of better management, better management of fertilizing, better management of pesticides, and that's showing that if growers generally follow the proper way to do things, that it doesn't affect water quality adversely, and it definitely doesn't affect the reef. I mean, the reef's a long way away from where a lot of this water quality monitoring is.
Yeah, I wonder where their head was at that sort of time, where they still stuck it back into the 50s and 60s when we used to have super bounties, because I come from West Australia, and they used to pay the farmers for putting super on. The more put on, the more bounty you got. So these days, there's no subsidies or incentives from government to fertilise. It's all your cost. And the last thing people want to do is increase their own costs. So it's sort
Yeah.
of a strange mentality to think people would apply more than they had to anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like it was, it was a genuine feeling in some areas that we were just dumping it on for the hell of it. But as fertilizer is expensive, it got very expensive a couple of years ago. It doubled in price. So I mean, why would you waste it? You want to make sure every bit you put on is getting to the plant is using it, and you're getting the best value out of it. Because, yeah, and when you explain that and you can prove it, you have your data, you have the proper agronomists, telling, backing up your story, it makes a big difference. And that's been a lot of what we've been doing for the last sort of 10 years. It hasn't been a matter of just cutting our fertilizer use. It's just showing showing the government the way we actually do it. And, most growers don't change many practices to become BMP accredited. They just document it and show it in a way that makes it sensible for people to understand. You don't want to over apply fertilizer. It's a very expensive thing, and you don't want to, it's not worth it in the long run. You'll just be throwing money down the drain, especially when you've got a crop in years when when the world price is low and you're just making things pay. You don't want to waste money on things.
The other thing too is that there's been developments over time with fertilizer, things like that. Like now, there's nanotechnology in that, and my brother-in-law's in turf farming and that, and he went to the States several years ago, and they're looking at nanotechnology in regards to fertilizers. So you can basically get fertilizer just to the area you want for it to work, and that you don't have to over apply it. So is that the sort of things that your organisation and other agricultural organisations look at all the time? Those incremental improvements that sort of can reduce the application of pesticides and fertilisers and all the other things that add to your cost base?
Yeah, absolutely. Like we have a SRA, Sugar Research Australia, is our research body, which is funded by growers and millers. And they look at a lot of these different programs. I mean, the sugarcane plant is only just had its genome mapped because it's one of the most complicated plants in the world. And I don't know why that is, but it just is. Apparently, it's very complicated to actually understand. And so therefore, there's a lot to learn about the actual plant and how it takes up fertilizer, how it grows, when it grows. We're learning all the time, I think, and I think there's a lot in that area of science that can really help to increase our sort of productivity going forward. And yeah, I know I don't know what it is, and I don't know what the program is that's going to do that, but it obviously it means that we have to keep researching these ideas and try and look at different ways of doing things to improve, because we can't just keep doing the same thing. We won't survive. So we have to keep improving.
So is there an international sugar growers conference or get together or something where all these sort of things get discussed, or you see the latest developments? I mean, there's different agricultural sectors that do have their annual global fest or whatever. Is there a similar sort of thing for cane growers?
Yeah, for the research arm, they have a conference called the ASCCT conference, which is basically a conference where all the sugar researchers come together once a year, and they look at all the different things that have been, all the different papers that have been produced, all the different studies that have happened, and then there's also an international section of that which looks at all different research organisations throughout the world, and they come together as well and look at all the different research proposals and things that come together. There's on the grower side, where as part of Canegrowers, and I'm also connected. I'm chairman of the Australian Canegrowers Council, which is affiliated with the World Association of Beet and Cane Growers, which is essentially all nearly all the sugar producing countries in the world are a part of that. So that's sugar cane and sugar beet. Um, there's something like 38 active members, I think. And then we come together once a year. We're actually holding the one in Australia next year, so that'll be the conference for all the different, and it's specifically growers, grower organisations like Canegrowers all around the world, and yeah, we come together and talk about. It's more looking at policy, advocacy, issues with regard to government. Um, there's everyone has, and it's good because everyone has the same issues with regard to government regulation, markets, pressure from different suppliers, and so it is a good opportunity to talk about these things. Some countries are really effective at influencing government, and we can learn a lot from them. The US, especially, they're probably the most effective sugar advocacy growers in the world. But yeah, there's certainly things that we learn from those groups, and yeah, I think it's important to keep ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. But with regard to research, Brazil's obviously a massive industry now, and they're very much a cutting edge in a lot of research developments, and I think it's important that we keep up to date with where they're going in a lot of what they're doing over there. I think they've got a more friendly government in a way that was allowed them to develop their ethanol industry, but they also have a massive population, so that helps when you've got a massive population that's relatively poor. So manufacturing is a lot easier in those sort of situations. So they've got a decent a decent ethanol industry, but it was developed through a lot of help from government.
Just in relation to the government, I mean, this is going back years ago when I was a kid. I used to go down the wheat farm to my uncle's wheat farm that he was just a manager of. But there seemed to be a much better partnership in those days with the old ag department and their research stations, and it was more of a help than a hindrance. They were sort of always proactive. They were easy to contact. They were always looking for at problems and trying to resolve them. Do you think somewhere along that relationship changed from a government sort of helping agricultural industries to a bit of a standover situation?
Yeah, that it's definitely changed. I mean, there was a lot more investment in agriculture in those days. Governments now want to every time they give money, they have all these parameters around it, and they don't put productivity and profitability a lot of the time at the head of those parameters, which is frustrating for the industry because we do get government funding for our research, and our research body is fed by the federal government as well. But there's a lot of parameters and things you have to jump through to get that, and it's obviously takes a lot of work to make sure that everyone's on the same page with government to achieve sort of the outcomes they want. Even biosecurity. I mean, we've had a big push this week to try and push in the state election about biosecurity. Just to get government to fund it is hard enough, and biosecurity is obviously the number one thing government. Yeah, I mean the federal Labor government wanted to introduce a levy to farmers to fund for biosecurity, and we just thought, well, that's just ridiculous. If you're going to put a levy on to fund biosecurity, you should at least put it on the people who import things. So the position of the National Farmers Federation was you've got to put it on importers because they're the ones who bring things in. It's not the farmers. But luckily we got that voted down, so it's sort of in stasis at the moment. But yeah, biosecurity is there's diseases that are not very far away in New Guinea and Indonesia that could absolutely decimate our industry, and so biosecurity is really important. And government do fund it to an extent, but they tend to wait until there's a disaster and then they come in, and it's like long time it's too late. I mean, the fire ant issue in Rocky Point is just appalling the way that's been handled over the last 20 years. I mean, if it wasn't for the Canegrowers of Rocky Point, there would have been fire ants all across the country because they've basically been fighting it on their own. The government was not funding it well, was not, they had programs, but they just weren't well run. They didn't have the sort of right things going on at the right time, and consequently, there's been a bit of a spread of the fire ants, and it's a real problem, and it needs to be resolved. And yeah, there's a lot of work that could be done better in that space, and obviously that's part of my job is to let government know that that's got to happen.
Do you think part of this problem is the ivory tower or the concrete blocks of Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Canberra being the absolute headquarters, and they don't have regional offices and input and stuff where they're getting actual feel of what's on the ground? Do you think the retreat of the agricultural department and primary industries department back to centralisation sort of has basically put them out of touch with what their real job is?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we're a very urbanized country, so there's a lot of people live in the big cities, and they tend not to care about agriculture as much as many other countries. I mean, we always have to battle just to get in, just to get noticed a lot of the time, and even to get agriculture as a major policy platform is really hard in a lot of cases. And I mean, that's the nature of governments. Governments go where the votes are, and all the votes are in the city. But I think it's more than government, though. I think it's people. There's a disconnect between city people and rural Australia, and it's definitely, people don't see us as an important part of the country. The sugar industry is $4 billion industry. We employ 20,000 people in Queensland. Like, we're nothing to be sneezed at. We're bigger than the higher education industry. We're bigger than a lot of other industries, whereas we have to battle just to get a measly bit of funding. So and I think that's an attitude of people who live in the city, who get food from the supermarket. It's just down the road, so they don't realise that it's it takes a lot of work to get that food there. And I think that's a big problem, and I don't know how you solve that, but I mean, obviously our aim is to try and create more more knowledge of that, and try and inject ourselves into the communities. Start with the young ones. We do a lot of work at the Ekka in Brisbane. We had a stall down there, and trying to push the industry onto young city kids, and it's just amazing how little they know. They don't know what a tractor is, don't know what a harvester is. They don't, and it's we had these VR headsets which they could actually sit in them, and they were just amazed. And we're also working a lot. We've done a lot of work with the Primary Industry Education Foundation, and we've come up with our own sugar industry curriculum in both primary school and high school, which is starting to expand across Australia. We're trying to target, it's obviously taking off a lot in the rural schools, but we're trying to target the city schools to get them involved, to say, look, hey, there's a big industry here. When you're a kid of 12 or 13, and you can literally, the amount of jobs available in the sugar industry, anything from from a chemist to it's not just being a farmer. We're a big, diverse manufacturing industry, and there's opportunities, and we're sort of screaming out for people to look at it. So that's a lot of what we're trying to do at the moment, just to create interest in our industry, to get people to come and be involved.
I think one of the other issues too is, over the years, we've had things like CSIRO research centres sort of close, and ag schools and other primary industry research stations that close over time. uh, that doesn't sort of help keeping enabling people to keep in touch with regional and rural Australia and the jobs, because I would have thought things like ag schools, played a great role in regards to yeah, fair enough. They were designed around people from farms and that learning more skills and staying on the farm, but they also presented opportunities because there was one up in Northern, which is only 60 miles from Perth. And a lot of people from technical high schools eventually, went out to and studied there, and went to land sort of use in their vocation later on. Um, these sort of things, seem to be get cut because of budgets and things like that. But they don't seem to realise that doing those cuts there actually impacts on the whole industry and Australia's food security and all those sorts of things. Um, do you think there can ever be a push again for things like ag schools and more primary industry research centres being re-established? Or is it just something that's never going to happen because the people who are running the budgets and that are in the big cities and uh, think the only people who can sort of do anything is people with some sort of great university degree or that, rather than people who've had hands-on experience and vocational training and experience?
Yeah, well, I mean, ag colleges used to be ag college here in the Burdekin. It was a very successful college, and yeah, it closed a fair while ago now, probably 20 years ago. But yeah, it's a shame. Those colleges were a great learning ground for farmers and non-farmers. If you were interested in an ag industry, you could go and learn all about it in one place. At the Burdekin Ag College, they had everything from pigs to sugarcane to vegetables to everything. They learn it all there. It's I don't know how you solve that. The government obviously stopped funding those sort of research programs. I mean, there's probably research that can be done at universities now, which happens a lot with a lot of our technical research is done through universities. But actually training people on the ground it's a problem, and I think I'm not sure how you could reestablish those things, but yeah, I think it's definitely
But
lacking.
we even had things like technical high schools. I mean, we didn't have, not everyone had to go the academic course. We had, even in a suburban area, you had a number of high schools, and usually uh, maybe 1 in 10 was a technical high school. So people who weren't inclined to go the academic course, they could go and do uh, chefing, catering, uh, metalwork, all those sort of trade orientation things. So basically, when they could still leave school 14, 15 and that, and then with that background, they could go and get an apprenticeship, and they already had some good understanding moving forward. But I suppose we may all be victims of the push to go. Got to be the smart country, and everyone's got to be pushed along the academic lines. So maybe eventually they'll figure out that's not the thing for everyone, and they might have to drift back to trade type orientation, because it's certainly a trade shortage at the moment. And if we're going to not sort of cater to that, we're causing ourselves all sorts of problems in the future, or they're already happening now. We've got this dependency on importing people to sort of fill these gaps.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, there was a pretty strong push there through the National Farmers Federation for an ag trade, like a proper trade to be brought into schools and TAFEs, which would be one way you could do it. I think, and then obviously it needs some government funding and a real emphasis to make it take off. They do have a program there called Ag Career Start, which is essentially targets high school leavers who want to get on a farm basically, and they go out sort of like a gap year program where they go and work on farms, and that program is oversubscribed massively. So there's lots of kids who want to go on farms. So they're like wanting more farmers to sign up to the program. I mean, obviously these kids are, yeah, you probably got zero skills, but they that's the best place to learn. Obviously, you've got to house them and all the process that goes involved with that. But there's plenty of kids who want to do it. It's just a matter of having the setup for them to work in. It's obviously difficult to get unskilled workers on in farms sometimes. With all the rules about workplace health and safety and stuff, you've got to be very careful about who you put in where, and especially in my industry, it's very much heavy machinery. So you've got to be very careful when you're putting people on machinery that they know what they're doing. But I don't think there's yeah I'm not sure what the answer is, but there's definitely a lot of kids who are interested in the rural lifestyle. It's just a matter of us trying to capture that, because it's a real problem going forward for our industry is getting labour. It's over and over again we're having trouble. This year it's finding good people, and I think it's going to be a problem in the future unless we can come up with some way of getting a pathway for people to come into it. I mean, a lot of people want to go to the mines and that sort of thing and work, but they can make pretty good money driving a harvester or a truck or a tractor in sugar industry. It's and they don't have to work away from home. They could be home every night. So we've got an attractive offer there. We just have to try and package it up a bit better and make people keen to get a part of the industry. You don't just want them driving the truck. You want them owning the truck. And I think that's probably the key to the future. You want them to be, I want to do this, and I want to, because most of the history of the sugar industry is immigrants who came in, cut cane, got to the stage where they earned enough money to get their own crew, or get to the size where they could span, and they could make an offer to get a farm. Usually, a lot of the time, with a group of them, they'd come together, they'd buy a farm, and eventually that farm would grow more cane, and that's basically how my great grandfather started, and it's pretty much how every other immigrant family started. You had to start in it, but you had to want to believe. You believe that there was a future. You wouldn't have started working in the cane fields if you didn't think that there was light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's probably something we need to promote a bit better too. If you work hard, you can become prosperous in this industry. Still, there's still opportunity there.
I think the other thing is, even schools today recognise that boys especially sometimes get disengaged with school, probably because they're not really feeling that they're academic enough or something like that. So I think there is, you obviously got a base there that you can tap, as long as the government provides those sort of trade high schools or ways or pathways that they can actually get there, rather than just continue to go to school and be disengaged. So I think we'd solve two problems at once. The industry's problems and the problems with some of our youth in regards to, they just don't fit. They don't fit the academic world. They're not interested. They just want a bit of hands-on, a real life experience a lot earlier than sort of, well, I don't really want to be stuck in the academic thing and sort of, be 23, 24, 25 when I get out of university and still don't know what I want to do because I didn't want to be here in the first place.
Yeah, that's true. It's there's a lot of, and it's about trying to get that pathway right, how you make it work. And I think there's opportunity there. We just have to try and work out how we do it. If you have any ideas, let us know.
Well, I think it should be coming from the government. They've got all the data and that. They can see all these things, but they don't seem to want to spend money in the right places. That's my general feeling. But just moving over to the other side now, going ahead in the future, We've had a bit of stop-start with biofuels and diversity within the sugarcane industry and sugar industry. How we sort of navigating that at the moment, because we've had people down in the Ingham area that they had talking about biofuels. It was quite about 2015 seemed to be a bit of a tick there. We've got people in Townsville through Townsville Limited or whatever it is, Enterprises. They're sort of pushing biofuels and things like that. Exactly where's the industry up to with all compared to the chatter that's going on from these innovators and that who are basically looking for more taxpayers' money?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of yeah, innovators is a good word. People who've got a lot of ideas, but I mean, the ethanol, yeah, it's been going as long as I've been in farming. There's been different. I mean, we do have a mill at Serena that's been producing ethanol for 100 years. So we have ethanol production. There's been different times where they looked at producing different ethanol factories and stuff like that. But and a lot of the time the cost and the government's rules and a lot of things broke the back of those industries. But the probably the game changer recently has been sustainable aviation fuel, because essentially what's happening is the airline companies have signed up to these. So much percentage of their fuel has to be from renewable sources, and so basically they have to find renewable ethanol from somewhere, renewable fuel from somewhere. And so therefore, and they're big companies and they've got a lot of money, so they're looking to invest. And we've been approached by a number of them, and that includes the big aircraft companies as well. But I guess it's at this stage nothing has really happened. But there's I think when you add money into an investment and big capital investment, that's probably where things can happen, which is different to trying to build an industry from the bottom up. This is an industry where they're chasing this product. They're either going to get it from Australia or they're going to get it from the US or Brazil. They'll need a lot of government help for it to take off in Australia. It'll need not just mandates, it'll need a lot of funding, and it'll need a lot of rules around it. So it basically forces the airlines to use Australian sustainable aviation fuel. It needs a lot of that, and that's we've got part of our campaign document that we're sending to both sides of government is it sort of outlines all of that. We need a policy that encourages that, or otherwise it just won't happen. It won't happen. They won't just go build a mill and hope for the best. It needs a lot of government intervention, and that intervention needs to be working with these big players so that they can develop these factories. Because and also the growers at the bottom end need to be involved, need to be paid appropriately. Otherwise they won't do it. So I think a lot of these firms come in and think that they can, they'll get the cane for nothing, and they'll say, oh, they'll be happy because they'll be, producing renewable aviation fuel. But farmers aren't like that. Farmers want to get paid, and they want to get paid well. They need to pay better than what we get for the world price, or don't even bother. So, and we've spoken to a lot of them like that, and they understand that. If they we're not going to change what we're doing now unless we get properly paid. So that's another discussion. But it's important for us as growers to be know what's coming and be talking to these players, so we don't get hoodwinked into something that isn't going to work.
Oh, I don't know about you getting hoodwinked, but I reckon the bloody taxpayer, the taxpayer is pretty well bloody peeved off in subsidising just about every bit of renewable stuff going around, that we probably don't see the real costs of that. But a lot of these things that they're talking about seem to suggest that it's not just sugar cane that they can use. They can use other other crops or other green material to sort of uh, keep the process, because your cane's only a 6 month operation type thing, as far as the crushing and that goes. So, and you really want a situation where if you're producing ethanol, you want a constant stream for the whole year. So, what sort of other bits and pieces come into play in regards to a sugar mill doing it, and what other material can it sort of, use from around the place to keep these sort of things going for as a 24/7, 365-day year operation?
Yeah, well, I mean, the the most ethanol in the world at the moment is made from corn in the US. So it's not just sugar. Essentially, a lot of the projects we're looking at are basically making the ethanol out of everything else and still producing sugar. You can make the ethanol out of the bagasse, the the leaf, and the juice. You can make it out of everything. The sugarcane crop is pretty unique in that way. Um, and if you needed to, well, if the money was there, I mean, you could grow other crops to keep it going all year round. It all comes down to money, of course. You can grow sorghum crops in rotation, and there's things like that which we can do in the Burdekin pretty easily. But it obviously you need to have the money. There needs to be you need to get paid enough to do it. But yeah, I think there may be opportunities there going forward, and it certainly if something does come about, it'll certainly keep the industry a lot more solid and going forward if something does work. But I don't know whether it will, and these companies come and go, and but I think we do have opportunities with the sugarcane plant that a lot of other plants don't have, and we're in and it's a plant that can survive extreme conditions. You just have to look at the sugarcane crop in the Cairns region after what it copped. I mean, it's quite phenomenal, really, that they can still produce 3 million ton of cane or whatever. After that event, nothing else you grow would ever survive that. So, there's areas that sugarcane's the only game in town. So, if we can make more value for that sugarcane, even so, you can survive those extreme events and still make good money. That's the ultimate, and that's obviously what we've got to look at. But there's no one answer, and there's nothing that's coming along that's going to solve all our problems. And maybe there'll be a few false starts, and you don't know what's going to happen. But it'd be good if we could secure something for a long-term future, and we're not relied on the world market.
Yeah, so Kane, after Kansas experience earlier this year, just proves it's a big tough weed.
Yeah, it is, and you can't grow it. And there's places in Queensland where you literally cannot grow anything else. It's the only thing to survive, except for water lilies or something. Like everything else would just die. So it's phenomenal, and all get washed away. And even like some of the damage I saw up in Canada, just unbelievable amount of water that was running through cane paddocks, and there was washouts and stuff, but most of the cane's still there. Like you couldn't think of any other crop that could handle that. And it's amazing to see something like that when it happens, and we're still producing the cane. It's the crop's obviously been knocked around badly, but it's still producing sugar. So that's I mean, that's something we should we should be excited to see. I mean, we've had cyclone events here in the Burdekin, and the crop survived. There was a bad cyclone Debbie in Proserpine, and it was ridiculous Category 5 cyclone that went through there, and that their crop was down, but they still produced. It wasn't a complete wipeout or anything. So that's I mean, that's probably a positive with our industry, that we can handle these things that most other industries can't.
Just going back to ethanol, do you think we have to treat some of the people, pushing the barrow on these things as a bit like snake oil salesmen, or do or do you think it's easy enough to pick out the ones that are reasonable versus the ones that have got harebrained schemes that just a bit of a drain on taxpayers?
Yeah, there's lots of harebrained schemes. I think I dare say Queensland Canegrowers gets contacted by someone nearly every week. So, and some of them have got good ideas, but they just obviously haven't got the money to make it work, you know. And some of the ideas work, you know, but they obviously need funding and capital, and they need someone to supply them with the product at a huge risk, you know. And farmers are not going to supply something where they don't know they're going to get an outcome. So, um, there's a lot of different, and one of them might work. That's all you can say really. One of them might work. There'll be a lot of failures, but one of them might work, and that's what you got to hope for.
Just in regards to the cane under irrigation, what sort of percentage of the cane's under irrigation versus that's just plonked in the ground and the floodplains take care of it or the rains just take care of it?
Uh, I might get the number wrong, but I think it's 60% of the Queensland crop is irrigated. So more than half is irrigated. In the Burdekin, we're 100% irrigation, but in areas like Mackay, there's a lot of supplementary irrigation. So they sort of only irrigate when they have to. Like Burdekin and even Bundaberg, Maryborough to some extent, more or less 100% with a bit less, probably a bit less, a bit more supplementary, and Tablelands is pretty much 100% irrigation. So yeah, probably the majority was irrigated, but yeah, there's a lot of supplementary irrigation. So there's areas where they irrigate, but it's only to get the cane out of the ground, and it's not like here. Virtually doesn't rain most of the time, so I've got irrigation going right now. I've got to go turn some pumps on, but yeah, we irrigate nearly all the time. So and that's just but we do grow bigger crops because of it, but it costs us a lot more with all the power, electricity prices and water prices and everything else. But yeah.
Well, that's what I was just leading to in regards to power, electricity costs. Are they sort of stabilised at the moment for you, or is it something you got to completely focus on and say, well, we know the only way it's going is up, so we have to factor that in as we move forward.
Yeah, they're starting to go back up again. We had a period of stabilization there. It was mainly good due to the fact that we managed to show that Ergon were overcharging for their network. So the Australian Energy Regulator managed to get them to reduce that price. So we actually had a reduction, which went across everyone, like those few years. But now it's all starting to turn around again. The prices of irrigation, electricity's probably one of the biggest costs in many areas, and we are really dependent on the price of electricity. If the price goes up exponentially, it can really affect a lot of growers, and a lot of growers about whether they actually bother to irrigate. It's too expensive to irrigate, so they don't. And it's a big problem. I mean, there's a lot in electricity. I could talk about electricity for an hour because it's very complicated, but we're still getting overcharged fundamentally. The simple rule: the government's taxing us, the government's making money out of it. They generate the power in Queensland. They run the network that puts all the power out, and they're the only retailer. There's only one retailer, and that's Ergon in regional Queensland, and they make money out of all three. So, yeah, that's the problem. That's the biggest problem. They do make money out of it, so they're not going to reduce prices. So, yeah, we're not getting any.
Well, the other problem is too they stick it up. The government sticks it up to Ergon and other utilities and that or services because if they look like they're making a bit of money, they'll stick more debt on them. I mean, there was a stage when Ergon had zero debt. It was just that zero debt was paying dividend and that. So I think it was back probably about 20 years ago now. Well, the government thought, oh, we've got too much debt. let's farm this debt out to ports north, airports, bloody anything else they own. They just stuck them the debt, and that just drives them their costs up because they've got to service these loans that they never took out themselves, but they've got to service. So. We, the government seems to find ways to hit us in every which way.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. The network charge and putting that level of debt on there. And it's very upsetting for farmers. Like, yeah, my family, most of the power line, most of the transformers we paid for. So I mean, and then they went and put the debt on the network, and we paid for the bloody thing. So anyway, sorry, but yeah, that makes you even more angry. I mean, yeah, moving the debt onto that was just ridiculous. But anyway,
Yeah,
and that's sort of, yeah, you're right. That was a long time decision. But yeah, anyway, we've got to try and
in
there's
regards
there's
to
ways. Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
no, you're right. You go.
In regards to irrigation, I mean, the potential up in the tablelands is there's good soil up in a lot of the places, and all you need is to add water. And I mean, even over towards Georgetown, if you could add water to some of that volcanic soil, you've got tons of things you grow. But do you think we're sort of, or the government sort of keeping focused on ensuring that we've got water supply so we can enlarge these areas? I mean, I'm not sure what the situation with the vertican is, but whether you sort of eventually going to need water if you're going to expand. But I mean, for the tablelands, it definitely does need more water storage to allow for agricultural expansion. So do you think there's enough attention going to water supply in our agricultural sector in Northern Australia, Northern Queensland?
No is a short answer, but yeah, no, there's definitely opportunity for a lot
It
of
was a leading
developments
question.
all
It was a
across.
leading question.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity. I mean, the second stage of the vertical, they've been talking about that for 20 years, and I think it's still a long way off. It's an easy one. It's a couple of meters on top, and it increases the capacity of the vertical dam massively. And I mean, up, yeah, as far as up north and certainly out west, yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for more water storage. And when you have water, yeah, you literally can grow anything because we've got a lot of sunlight in Northern Australia, and there's opportunities there, but there's a there's a genuine there's not an appetite in the cities for that sort of thing. They don't think there's value in it, so that's a problem.
Well, the thing is, if you want to grow the pie for the nation, you've got to invest and grow the pie with different industries and that. I mean, we're never going to we're never going to improve our situation if the pie doesn't grow, and the only way to grow the pie is develop. And the areas that got the most potential is obviously Northern Australia. I mean, next year is 10 years at 10th anniversary of the white paper for the development of Northern Australia, and we've basically got nothing out of that. But Northern Australia is it's got 80% of the mainland's rainfall. And if you just look at Northern Queensland, we've got about 34% of mainland Australia's rainfall. And the Murray-Darling Basin only gets 6% of the Australia's rainfall. So the potential up here is unlimited, but no one seems to be, stepping forward. It's in the government's realm anyway to sort of give us the ability to create that wealth for the nation.
Yeah, no, it's a big problem. And then when they do develop it, they want to charge you so much to access it, which is another problem too because of their rules and their regulations. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
yeah,
well, it's
it's an
quite
ongoing
interesting you just
problem.
said that because we'll wind up in a second, but when they do a business case for things like the Cross River Rail, they take into account how many steps people save, by having this railway and how many minutes they save going to work. When we want to build a dam, they work out, well, let's do a cost benefit, and then they say, well, we've got to get our money back. Like that's their main focus. What we spend capital, we have to get that back. And they want the return time in 20 or 30 years. Yet a dam will last, 100 plus years. So if they're only using that as their cost base type thing or return, it makes the water, well, we've got to sell the water at $5,000, $5,000 a gigaliter, a megaliter or something like that, which puts people off. Well, no one's going to pay that, so that won't go ahead. So I expect that we
Yeah,
do need
it's a
those sort of
huge problem.
discussions to ensure when they do these cost benefit, we get better criteria, so we can actually get these projects over the line.
Yeah, they need to look at dams as public infrastructure. It should be treated like a road. It should be treated like Cross River Rail or whatever the hell they build in the city. It should be just public infrastructure and treated as such. Because the money that comes from that public infrastructure benefits the whole country. It's not just about getting a bit of a shorter commute when you walk from one side of Brisbane to the other. You're actually producing something. But anyway.
Well, the other thing is like the Cross River Rail, it's actually a liability forever. I mean, you never get enough user pay fares to pay for it. So it's never going to make a profit. It's never going to earn anything. It's always going to be high maintenance. Whereas at least if you build a dam and water, you attract people, business, agriculture, all the rest of it. You actually grow the economy, but that doesn't seem to come into their calculations. But we've gone over the hour. I'd just like to sort of finish up now with letting you have a bit of a conversation in regards to where you want the industry to go to under your tenure, and how it looks in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously I'd like the industry to grow. I think I'd like to see confidence in farmers. I mean, hopefully we can see this price extend out for a period of time. We've had spikes in prices over the last couple of decades, but they haven't lasted for long. Whereas it'd be good to see a reasonable price being the norm, and that would create confidence and that would create expansion. I think there's going to be a lot of new farmers coming into the industry. I think there's probably a lot of younger people who are coming into the land, taking over from parents and whatever. And I think it's important that we connect with them and continue to grow and continue to innovate, because there's innovation is the key, and that's what got our industry where it is, and we have to keep coming up with ways to do that. Otherwise we will shrink. That's probably the scariest thing going forward.
Okay then. Look, I'd like to thank you for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. If you just hold on the line, I'll just introduce next week's show and just have a quick discussion off air.
All right.
Right. Thanks, Owen. If you enjoyed today's night's show, please like, share, and subscribe to our Facebook page and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Next week, I'll have Dan Petrie on. Dan Petrie has been a journalist for the Courier Mail for a long time. He's also an economics buff or trained, and we'll be having a discussion in regards to how the Southeast Queensland thinks of North Queensland in regards to being a separate state and being able to stand on its own 2 feet. So we'll have that discussion next week with Dan Petrie. Thank you.